Good afternoon, I'm Molly O'Brien. Thanks so much for joining us here on GoLocal Live in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. We'd like to start off today's show with Ray Rickman. He is founder of Stages of Freedom and former Rhode Island State Representative. He has his weekly political video opinion broadcast. It is Rickman's Big View.
Thank you, Molly. So in the 1950s, when I was a kid, which tells you I'm past 60, okay, we had coal. And if you did anything wrong, you had to go put the coal in the furnace, just the boys, 3 of us. So it was otherwise you had your day. And you went down there and it was dreadful. Coal was dirty, it was smelly. You'd come back full of soot, as we said. And you have a shovel, and you started age 7 or 8, then you had to have your own coal morning. It was dreadful. And you didn't put a lot of coal in to start the day during the week, but Saturday and Sunday you could put coal in. And Detroit was cold, and you needed coal, black coal, nasty black coal. You ready? In 1950, 64% of all the households in Detroit used coal. In 1960, 29%. 10 years. Went from 64 to 29%. In 1970, 11%. And today, 1%. And I don't know who they are. I asked the coal. You buy clean, expensive coal now. And it costs a lot of money. And of course, electricity and gas and oil all cost less. And there isn't a single viewer. I'm told less than 1% of people in Rhode Island use coal. So there's probably not a single viewer who's going down to use coal today. And coal comes in packages now, and it's expensive, like I told you. So in the last election, they're blaming President Obama for the loss of coal as a use in this country. A lie. People lie all the time. And the people they're lying to, if they were being logical, would know that the people are lying to you. You don't? They keep saying, how am I supposed to know? You don't use coal! And you don't know anyone who uses coal. So, and you didn't stop using coal in 2014 during the Obama presidency. You stopped in 1974. Can I tell you this? I want some feedback. I want anybody who was using coal in 2004 to call Josh, don't call me, and say, Rickman's a liar. We were using coal in West Warwick in 2004. I'm all animated about this because this nation is in trouble because people believe lies that they should not believe. There are things about nuclear fusion you really have to be a scientist or get on the web for hours to figure out. But whether you use coal or not, and when coal went away because it's dirty. It's hard to transport. It causes disease. You have to dig it in the very deep hole. In the 1870s or 80s, when we started digging, you only had to dig that deep. Now, do you know how deep you have to dig? You have to rip mountains down in West Virginia to get any coal, and then transport it all the way to Detroit. You ain't gonna do it because electricity costs 1/3 as much. Are you listening? This is not about coal. This is about quit being fooled by liars. Use your own experience, your own life, and we will be a much, much better nation if you do that. Stop, pay attention. Your children's future might depend on it.
That was Ray Rickman with his weekly opinion broadcast, Rickman's Big View. If you want to check out the archives, you can find all of them on GoLocalProv.com. We're going to take just a brief moment to get set up here for our next guest on GoLocal Live, and we will be with you momentarily. Thanks. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us here on Go Local Live in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. I'd be pleased to welcome Corin Hirsch. She's a writer, an author, and a food critic at Newsday. Thanks so much for joining us, Corin.
Thank you for having me, Molly.
So I'm super excited to be chatting with you today. You are the author of Forgotten Drinks of Colonial New England, from Flips and Rattle Skulls to Switchel and Spruce Beer. You're going to be coming down to Rhode Island to give a book talk, a lecture, and a book signing at Linden Place on Saturday. Also a tasting. So
Yes.
Pretty fun. Talk to us a little bit about the book and how you got into researching Forgotten Drinks in New England.
Sure. So I wrote this book a few years ago when I was a food writer up in Vermont. I worked in Burlington for a number of years, and I was writing about drinks quite a bit. There's, of course, a lot of great beer coming out of Vermont and a lot of distilleries cropping up there. And I undertook this book as sort of a research project to discover the historic roots of what I was writing about in a modern context. And I discovered, of course, that people drank quite a bit back in the 16 and 1700s. So that was the primary discovery. And
I think it's so fun because we take a look back at our history, our different foods and drinks, and kind of really where things evolved from. Can you talk a little bit about what are some things that people drink? Is it what we drink now, or is it entirely different?
well, beer was really the first thing that was coming over early with some of the first immigrants from Europe. There was beer on the Mayflower famously, and there was a dispute between the crew and some of the passengers over the dwindling beer supplies. So we still drink beer now. The beer that they were drinking was probably a bit weaker than ours, more sessionable, as they would say these days. And then pretty quickly that was joined by cider, hard cider, because apple trees loved New England soil, and we had a lot of orchards, and cider was a lot easier to make than beer. And it was a great way to preserve the apple harvest as well come fall. And you can keep a lot of barrels of cider through the winter, and it was a part of the daily table back then.
And we're starting to see kind of a cider revolution once again. Is that really kind of a tip to our historical roots here in New England?
It is. I think it is. Cider disappeared as temperance gained steam in the mid-1800s, and then just sort of vanished from the drinks map, from the American drink scene for a good 100 years. And then, of course, cider started to be made again a few decades ago, and it was known as a sweet drink and really not that good. And now, of course, we have incredible craft ciders being made all over the country, and especially New England. So yeah, it's sort of, you can draw a direct line back, although cider did vanish for a while.
So who really drank different alcoholic drinks? Are we looking at people who really could afford alcohol, or was this really just easy access, anybody and everybody goes?
It was pretty easy access. I think wine was sipped by people who have more means. The founding fathers famously loved wine, and Madeira, which is a type of fortified aged wine. But rum was pretty cheap come the 1700s. There was a lot of distilleries here in Rhode Island, especially in Massachusetts, and there was so much rum being made. Not always great rum, but some of it was good and some of it probably wasn't. But its price fell through the 1700s until there was the Molasses Act and things like that that caused a break in supply. And cider was something you could make from your own orchard with very simple equipment. So drinking was really done by all classes. And if you didn't have a lot of money, maybe you'd water down your rum into grog, which is essentially water, rum, and maybe some citrus if you had it.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Actually, you can make a decent grog if you just, try at it a little bit, but it's probably some versions of it weren't that good.
So there's a lot of places, especially in Providence, that are known for an excellent craft cocktail. Do we see those emerging at all back in colonial times, or did you really just stick to beer, rum, wine, cider? Was it really just basic stuff?
No, people were mixing those basics into, the word cocktail didn't really come about until the early 1800s. So before that concept existed, people would drop rum in cider, and that's a stone fence. That's something that we'll try at Linden Place on Saturday. And they were mixing beer with rum and eggs and milk to make flip, which was a big drink back in the day. It sounds disgusting, but actually it's quite good. You stick a hot poker into it to heat it up, and it kind of sizzles and chars, and it gets this wonderful smoky flavor. It's like a charred eggnog, and it was very big back in the day.
So getting experimental.
Yeah.
Do you think that, what was it like for you to be able to research this? Did you go back to like first to context? Did you go back to diaries? How did you do the research for this without just going out and drinking a lot?
Well, I went to both primary and secondary sources. So town histories were a great source of information. Some towns would record how much cider people in the town made that year. I think I found a weird potato liquor that was made in a Vermont town. And also some legislative bodies, the Vermont legislature, I think of 1787, they recorded everything they drank as they traveled around the state.
Wow.
So you could just see this list of what they were drinking, and there were cobblers and all lots of cider and different drinks and beer. So there were diaries, and of course there's secondary sources, people who were writing about those drinks. So I read those accounts. So I was cobbling together all of these different sources, time spent in historical societies, and I'm chasing historic sites and whatnot.
I just think that's so fun. Was it difficult for you? You know, you're looking up first and secondary sources. Then did you have to look up, like if you found a drink, you know, in the title of your book, flips, rattleskulls, switchels. Like, did you then have to look up, well, what does that mean? What's in that? And look up ingredients lists and cookbook, that kind of thing?
I did. Yeah, some things would be, I'd have to cross-reference between sources, but the drinks that are listed in this book, and it's a pretty, it's a few, I forget how many pages, but it's a pretty short book. It's 100 pages or so. So the drinks in there, I would see numerous references to them. So I don't recall a time where it was hard to find out what was put into something. You know, there weren't too many. As you mentioned, the building blocks were pretty basic. There was rum, cider, there was maybe some cream, some nutmeg was a big spice back in the day. We still use nutmeg, but nutmeg was shaved over drinks often in some of the finer taverns, or you might travel with your own nutmeg and present it to be shaved over your drink. So basic building blocks and just recombined in many different ways. So nothing too complicated. And but the names are funny, aren't they? I mean, it's, you know, they're very consonant, and it's great.
A delicious mouthful to go, name-wise, to go along with your delicious mouthful. Did you find it, and this is a history of New England, did you find any big differences when you went looking at the New England colonies and what they drank?
That's a good question. I think in New England, you had some specific drinks. Like Vermont, there was a drink called switchel. I don't know if you've heard of switchel. It's sort of a maple-based, gingery or vinegary drink, depending on how it's made. That's quite specific to Vermont. I think it's probably made in other states, but you find some Vermont families have switchel recipes that were passed down through the generations. And certain fruit wines might be limited to different areas, but for the most part, like stone fences, you'd find them in the cities and in the rural areas. And I'm trying to think if there's anything specific to Rhode Island that I found. Nothing springs to mind offhand, but yeah, so some specific things, but also the bigger difference would be between the South and the North. So the southern states might have different concoctions than the northern states, but New England was kind of uniform in some ways.
So fascinating.
Drinking-wise.
Drinking-wise. So let's talk a little bit about the event coming up. You're going to be at Linden Place on Saturday. So it's the book talk, so we'll be giving much more context to the book. Also doing a tasting, which is really fun. So people are a little bit intimidated. What will you be tasting, sampling along while you're chatting about the book?
Yeah, so we're making 3 drinks to sample. We are making flip, which, for the adventurous taster in the crowd. I always try to sell people on it. That's the drink with eggs and cream and beer and rum and heat it up, but it's pretty good. We'll be making some flip. We'll be making stone fences, which I mentioned, cider and rum. It's a pretty simple drink, but very refreshing. It sounds deceptively simple. And then I'm making some fruit shrub to bring to the event, which is a kind of a fermented fruit with sugar and vinegar. It's got a tang to it. It's really refreshing as well. And that's something that people would have used to preserve fruit that was going off, or if they had too much of a certain kind of fruit, you could make shrub with it. So we'll be tasting those 3 drinks, and it's a great way to talk about history. I've done different kinds of events around this book, and I love when there's a tasting. It's really fun. It's animated, and it's just, you're directly connected to what people were drinking and tasting hundreds of years ago.
A little taste of history. I absolutely love this idea. Before we let you go, Corin, I do want to talk, because you are a food critic and you've traveled around and you do currently write for Newsday. You have visited our beautiful city of Providence. We are well known for good food in the city, but wanted to pick your brain a little bit on some thoughts, ideas that you had when you have visited Providence.
Yeah, Providence has such a vibrant food scene, as you all probably know, and I've visited maybe 2 or 3 times, not in over a year, but had drinks at the Dorrance, I believe, last time I was there. Went to Mill's Tavern, it was delicious. Gracie's, which was great, and there was this little Japanese place I love called Ebisu. I'm probably mispronouncing the name. It seemed to be out of the city center, and they do these skewers of meat. I had chicken skin skewers. It's my thing. I love Japanese-style bar food. So, and some Italian food on Federal Hill. I mean, you could spend weeks, months, if not years, eating around Providence. It's such a great food city. I love it.
Well, it's always good to get an outsider's perspective. We can get a little biased around here, so it's always nice to get an outsider's perspective. Will you be able at all to spend any extra time checking out some other food scenes here in Rhode Island while you're visiting for your book talk?
I'm not sure. I hope to have lunch in the area on my way up, and maybe dinner if I have time after the event. Not sure where I'm going to go, but I might have one of your famous hot dogs, the Olneyville, New York system. That's pretty quick, good to eat on the way back down. So.
Well, they were just in here yesterday, so definitely recommend one of those, and some coffee milk as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Well, Corin Hirsch, thank you so much for joining us today. The book is Forgotten Drinks of Colonial New England, and she's hosting the book talk, the signing event at Linden Place on Saturday. It all starts at 5:30, and you can get there early and go do a tour. Why not? So thank you so much. We're going to get set up here for our next guest on GoLocal Live, so hang with us, please.
Thank you, Molly.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. I'd like to say hello and welcome to our next guest, Mary Johnson with the Rhode Island Students of the Future. Hello, Mary.
Hi, Molly. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited to be chatting about this with you today. The robots return, the Rhode Island Robot Block Party happening this weekend, starting out, it's the 5th annual one, from 11 to 4 p.m. Happening this weekend. It's a free event. It's great for everyone to come out and check out So many different kind of robots. Tell us what's happening, Mary.
Certainly. The Robot Block Party is a partnership with the Humanity-Centered Robotics Initiative, which is a group at Brown that does research into robotics, and Rhode Island Students of the Future, which is a group that engages kids in science, technology, engineering, art, and math through robotics. And we get together to host a community event where you can see robots created by very little kids who are just getting started in robotics, mostly made out of Lego, all the way up through the research that the faculty is doing at Brown. We have industry like Zebra and Spartel who will be talking about their robots as well. So there will be things to watch, things to do, lots of hands-on stuff for people of all ages. And it's a free, all ages family event at the Pizzatola Center in Providence.
I think this is so cool because not only are we seeing more and more technological advancements happening through robotics, but one of my favorite things to talk about here is STEAM and getting more access to more kids and more adults, frankly, getting more people involved in STEAM programs. And so this is a free opportunity for you to go in and see what's happening not only in our community, but with kids all the way up to modern research that's happening right here. So it's so cool.
Exactly. That is what's cool about it, is that we say that every child who's there can see someone a little bit older than them, so they see the direct pathway all the way through from school all the way through. The Brown Robotics Olympiad has their competition there, so there'll be teams from across the Northeast coast. They're competing with their robots, so you can see what competitive robots you can get involved in. You can see what research is being done, and we think that for the older faculty and for the professionals in the community, it restores their hope in mankind, because they see that the generation coming up behind them is really indeed smart, creative, and interested in solving the problems of the world with robots and technology.
I think that's a great way to look at it, that not only does it encourage young people coming up, like get them excited, but that restorative factor, I didn't think about that. You know, when you're working around in the lab every day, you can get worn down, but it excites you and invigorates you and reminds you that there's more people coming up and just makes you work a little bit harder.
Exactly.
So that's and
they're always, the older people are always amazed at how innovative the kids are, that they solve problems in a completely different way. And so it's a very kind of refreshing event for everybody. And we literally will have people who bring their families, from little babies in the packs all the way up to buses from senior centers who will come in and bring people. So it's just great to see, like, engineers who might live in a nursing home where there's not somebody to talk to about their interests, who will just talk about all the things that they interest with somebody else who gets it.
And I love the idea because people solve things or look at things in different ways. And again, one of the things I love talking about is STEAM, not just STEM. We often hear STEM so many times, but adding that A for art in there, STEAM, because people use their brains differently, and so adding that art concept in there as well. Let's talk a little bit about who's involved, who's going to be there, and some of the things that people can see, because like you said, all ages and all people are welcome, because it is a free family event, because there is a lot of things that you can see here.
There are lots of things. So you can come in and meet, the Sproutella is going to be there with Affleck, their new duck, and Jerry the bear, which are both therapeutic robots that help with kids who are undergoing, and people who are undergoing medical conditions. Brown has been working, the Humanity-Centered Robotics Initiative has been working with Hasbro on a product called Joy for All, which is a cat, and they're adding some sensors to it to make it more responsive. It's used a lot in nursing homes where you can't keep a pet anymore, but you still want the comfort of having a pet, and is used in therapeutic research. But there'll be things like that you can see and touch and do, and there will also be a robot that Stephanie Tellex at Brown is doing research with, who is my size, Sawyer, and he is learning how to pick and place things and fold laundry and do all sorts of things that would be available for the home. He's currently primarily used in pick and place, which is packing boxes in a manufacturing setting, and she's starting to do a lot of research to help transition that product into home use.
Wow, that's incredible. So we have the actual robots that you can see, touch, feel, but also, like, let's talk about kids for a minute. kids can actually get in there, get some hands-on experience, and kind of build their own, right? We have a
Yes.
station for that.
Yep, there are all sorts of stations. So there will be everything from the Providence Children's Museum is bringing a product that helps you build contraptions that move. So they will have, which don't necessarily have motors, so they're not considered, or sensors, so they're not considered robots per se, but it all is part of the pipeline that moves you up in the critical skills. And there will be art bots, which are similar, where you get your creative sense on and you start with a foam cup and a little servo motor and you make a little robot that walks around. The VR people will be there, so you can experience virtual reality. There will be lots and lots of things to do, plus lots of Lego elements, so kids can build their own robots and help learn that way.
So that's one spectrum. Then we have the total other spectrum. A lot of universities getting involved, university teams, people talking about research as well, correct?
Exactly. So there will be some, we say it's not as sedate as a poster session. You would see at a university, the faculties actually and students are very engaged with talking with people about their research, but the Ocean Engineering program from URI is bringing their robots that work underwater. The Wearable Biosensor Lab is coming with they're starting to put sensors and feedback tools into clothing, and that we can monitor your workout, all that kind of thing. And of course, Brown will be there with Baxter and with the turtle robot, I believe, which is actually learning how to navigate around space based on interactions from people. So they will talk about the different forms of research they're doing. RISD is there with their moon buggy. So there are all sorts of different ways to learn about like all the really advanced research that's being done here in Rhode Island that's starting to make New England a hub for robotics.
I think the TurtleBot is really neat.
It
Just
is
being able
fun.
to say TurtleBot.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't know what it was until you explained it to me, but TurtleBot is just a cool thing to say. The underwater research fascinates me. Obviously, URI has an excellent oceanography program.
Indeed
And
they
so
do.
being able to kind of pick people's brains hands-on, what kind of research is happening here? And someone from, I thought I read someone from Woods Hole is coming in talking about ocean research as well using robotics.
I think that they're actually coming to the Brown Speaker Series that the Humanity Centered Robotics Initiative hosts. So that's their HCRI is our partner in running the community event.
Okay.
They also host talks that are open to the public during the week, and there's a link to that on our website.
Perfect.
So that people can come, and that's where you actually hear the academics really delve into their research and where the challenges are and where the opportunities are to use the research. But it is everything, they're doing climate change research, all sorts of stuff that they can do with underwater robots.
So what I think is so neat about this is you're really providing access for anyone and everyone if you can get there. Talk to me a little bit about why Rhode Island Students of the Future finds it important to provide access for people and how we can get better at providing access to STEAM.
Certainly. It's important. There is research that shows that, especially with girls and underserved kids, if you can introduce them to science, engineering, technology, and math, but specifically robotics, in the 3rd or 4th grade, you get them excited about it and help them see a path for themselves before the cultural barriers start to break down or start to come up. So kind of before that message that you're not good at math or you're not good enough at math start to be deeply ingrained. And so one of the things about robotics and STEAM in general is it's a really great way to solve community problems, whether that's how older people are going to live independently as our society transitions to be a much older society and there are fewer kids and fewer people available to be caregivers, how we could have our streets be safer, all sorts of things, water quality, I could just go on and on and on. And so Rhode Island Students of the Future is organizes a program called First Lego League, which is a global program, and it has a research project along with a robot competition. So every year there's a theme that gets them to think about, well, how is this technology applied to real world problems? And that's one way to engage kids to, one, understand that there is a future in this and that it has a very practical path forward. It's not just about memorizing math formulas, and it's not just about building robots for cool robot space or on TV, often you see battle bots.
Yeah.
And so they think, well, if they're not involved in battle, then it's not really a robot. And it is. There are lots of peaceful ways to use robots too.
I think that's a great point, is if it's not involved in battle, then what's it good for? So things like the Robot Block Party gives examples, specific examples of how useful robots can be. So we talk about, and the first Lego League is so cool. I mean, and the competition, like you watch the videos on what the competition is, and you're like, what, kids are gonna build these? I don't even know how you made that video. So it's super challenging, and our students today are doing this and thriving at it. But I think that makes it you make a really great point on, let's talk about how we can make these robots work for us and make our future better.
Exactly. And to do that, you need a broad diversity of people involved in them. I mean, that's it. In the early days of sensors, which were mostly designed by older white men for other white gamers, you would have games that wouldn't do facial recognition if your skin wasn't white. And that's just, you know, it's not the way of the world now. And so, but you need to be able to consider those kind of problems, and part of that means you need to look outside your own cultural bubble, and by getting more people engaged in being able to solve the problems, we naturally build outside our cultural bubbles.
So let's say we're providing this access. What else can we do here in Rhode Island to make sure that access is easy to get to for people of all diverse levels here in Rhode Island? How else do we expand this? You know, Rhode Island Students of the Future is obviously working hard at this, but what do we do next? You know, we're providing this great event. What comes after this?
We would love to see robotics be part of the curriculum more explicitly. Right now, a lot of the robotics programs are after-school programs, and by definition limited to a certain number of students within the school. So not engaged, doesn't have the funding to be engaged with all of the students in the school. So kind of like the CS for Rhode Island program, which has gotten computer science into the classroom during the school day, we would like to see more robotics used as tools within the school day. In order to let a broader section of kids and schools all over the state really get more involved in it.
How much do you think that this is where jobs are going?
Well, within the next, I want to say 10 to 15 years, as I said earlier, the number of people who are over 65 is going to grow by like 1 million, and there really isn't and the population of our state is changing. So we're going to have to look at different kinds of solutions for the problems of having a mostly retired workforce. One of those ways will be automation in factories. I work for Polaris, which is the manufacturing extension program, and we are always looking for ways to help companies find ways to diversify but also save money. And going forward, seriously looking at automation is going to be an important part. Healthcare is another piece where there may be a need for not robots that are doing primary health care, certainly, but where you can have augmentation to help offset some of those repetitive jobs that need to be done over and over, but that don't necessarily be done by a human or could be done in tandem with a human.
Well, and that's what's interesting is I was going to let you take that question in whichever direction you wanted to, right? Because people can talk about automation in ways that makes people very nervous, but you can also talk about it in, there's students right now who are developing robots that we don't even know about, that can be the next game changer in the health industry, right? Or in science and technology or engineering. I saw a story where there are people laying bricks in tandem with a robot that was laying bricks.
Right.
So we don't know what's going to happen in the future, humans and robots working interactively together. So
yeah, no, that's great. And actually at Brown there's research. George Canaderis is working on research where he's building a chip or creating a chip that will make the robots that are automated in factories much smarter, so that right now when you look at the robots that build cars, it's kind of the one robot that does the same thing. It puts on a windshield, and the software or the chip that he's developing will help make the robot be able to locate itself in time and space, which makes it much safer and also able to make decisions much more quickly. So I think that we're on the verge of a real big jump in terms of technology and in terms of knowledge, and that's going to, in a lot of ways, help people's work days be less repetitive but also, like I said, maybe more friendly, and certainly in communities like the medical community, there are all sorts of ways. And another one that always I have heard talks at Brown about is robots that help socialize children who are on the autism spectrum. And it's so heartwarming to watch, because you get, they really open up to something that is responsive to them, where they don't sense that judgment that often comes from an adult who is making a judgment about them. So it is an amazing thing to watch, and it is cool to see robots happening in all sorts of different ways.
And it's only just the beginning, which is so cool. And Rhode Island Students of the Future help making it happen.
Yes, we certainly do. So we're doing the first Lego League, we do the Robot Block Party. We also offer a professional development course for teachers in the summertime.
Oh, that's neat.
To help get more teachers comfortable, because often that's the thing, is those of us who are a little bit older are not necessarily comfortable with the technology. To get people comfortable with the technology so that they feel comfortable learning alongside their kids as they're implementing this in the classroom.
That's perfect. All right, so the Robot Block Party, Rhode Island Robot Block Party is this Saturday, 11 to 4 o'clock. It's free. It's at the Pizzatola Center, 235 Hope Street in Providence. So head on out. Take your family, take your friends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Get inspired.
Yes.
Get inspired. So Mary, thanks so much for joining us here on Go Local Live. We're going to get set up here for our next guest, and we're going to not talk about technology. We're going to talk about something totally different, your imagination, which all involves STEAM, right?
Yes, indeed it
Imagination.
does.
So hang tight as we get ready for our next guest.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. That was great. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us back here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. I'm happy to welcome back Ethan Gilsdorf. He's a writer, a professor, a teacher, a poet, and a self-proclaimed nerd. Ethan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
We're happy to have you back. So, okay, we were just talking about robots and STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, math, all that kind of stuff. And now we're talking about, we're getting rid of the robots, and we're talking all about using our imagination.
Yes.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
You love it. You
I
say
do.
it's good for us.
It is good for us.
It makes us better people. And you're actually going to be teaching classes at the Rochambeau Library coming up for young adults, kids, teenagers. Yeah. So we're going to talk about, he has 5 reasons why Dungeons and Dragons will make you a better person. So if that's not a reason to take your class.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know what is.
Other than to have fun. I mean, that's obviously the main thing. You know, for the kids, it's like, just get them in the door, tell them that it's fun, and then secretly, you know, we teach them other things.
You teach other things. So
it's like a subversive
You've written like extensively on this. You've done a TEDx talk. You've written many articles for Salon. I mean, this is like something that you do. You truly believe in this because it really did change you. Yeah. So you brought a big die for us. For people who don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is, let's really talk about it and kind of explain it, and then we'll get into why it will make us all better people.
Sure. So Dungeons and Dragons is a fantasy role-playing game. And I think when most people think of role-playing games, they think of online games like video games.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm also a total nerd when it comes to video games, but this is a game that involves no screens, no devices at all. And it's the game I grew up playing. I learned how to play when I was a middle school kid back in the 1970s, if you can imagine. And it's a very low-tech game. We use dice, not necessarily a dice this big, but multi-sided dice, little figurines, a map, but most of it is a sort of group storytelling experience. And that's the best way to sort of describe it. Imagine if you know, like, a book like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or something like that. Those characters in those books, they go off and have adventures, things happen to them, and each kid or each character in those stories have unique traits and personalities and unique sort of special abilities, right? So in a game like Dungeons and Dragons, which is sort of the fantasy swords and sorcery version of, really, there's many kinds of role-playing games, but Dungeons and Dragons is the best known one. As a player, you get to be imagine you get to be Bilbo Baggins or you get to be Harry Potter. And we sit around a table and we tell a story together. There's one person sort of in charge of the plot and sort of behind the scenes, sort of deciding what really is going on in the background. But really each character as a group, you and your friends, decide what happens. So if you and I were playing, for example.
Okay, we're going to play.
We're going to play very brief, do a little role play here.
A little one.
I've
never played before.
Yeah.
I should tell you this.
Yeah, but you're familiar with the genre of like what
Yes.
a fantasy kind of thing is.
Yes.
And that's what's,
Yes.
in a way, that's what's great about D&D is that when I played it, no one really knew that genre, but now because of the popularity of video games and things like Lord of the Rings, everyone kind of gets what a dwarf and an elf is and a hobbit. So you and your adventuring party are, about to approach a castle or something where you have to rescue a little boy who's been captured from the local town.
Okay.
So do you want to be a thief, a wizard, a warrior, or like a holy woman, like a powerful priest?
Wizard.
Okay, you're a wizard. All right. So you might have a party with several characters, each of whom are represented by one of the different people around the table. You are the wizard. All right.
Okay.
So you come to the table. You come to the castle. The person who tells the story says, "Okay, Molly."
Wait, I want to be a wizard, but no one knows I'm a wizard.
Oh, no one knows a wizard.
Yeah.
Okay, you're sort of a stealth wizard. You got
Yeah,
your robe.
stealth
No one really knows
wizard.
what goes on. And I might say to you, okay, you have some choice. You need to get into the castle.
Okay.
You could, cast a fireball and blow the door open. You could try to sneak around and try to find a way into the castle. You might try to scale the castle. You might be able to cast a spell that would allow your party to get. So I would say to you, basically, all right, here you are, Molly. What do you want to do? And what do you want to do?
I'm going to just snap my fingers and everyone's inside.
And everyone's inside.
Yeah.
Okay. So
but
then
no one remembers how they got
okay.
in there.
Okay. So then what I would do is you're going to cast a spell, and I would have you. Usually, what we do in this game is we roll dice to determine whether you get to do it or not. So
okay.
I will say something like you need to roll, a 13 or something for that spell to take effect. So you would roll it. You can't see this off camera, but she has rolled a 20! Oh my God, this
What
is
does that
amazing.
mean?
A 20 is amazing. Congratulations. It's like winning. It's like getting the golden ticket in Willy Wonka or something. So. The 20 is like the coveted holy grail roll. This never happened. This is awesome. So when you when you roll a 1, you fail miserably, and when you roll a 20, amazing things happen. So like in the movie The Hobbit, they're trying to kill the dragon, and they shoot the one arrow, and it goes into the spot right where the dragon doesn't have any armor, and it kills the dragon. Right. So this is sort of the version of that. So you not only have you managed to teleport the entire party into the castle, but you have teleported them directly into the room, the secret chamber in the dungeon, where the little boy prince has been held captive.
Okay.
And also you, come up with something awesome that happened. And you also discover in the room that there's, a big pile of treasure and a magic sword.
And pizza.
And pizza, exactly. Wild boar and dragon brontosaurus pizza or something like that. So normally what would be happening is if you were playing with, typically you can't play with just 2 people, you need 3 or 4.
Okay.
You as a group would decide, and then your other person who's in your group who might be a thief or a warrior say, I'm gonna do this. And you guys as a group, and this goes to the part about how D&D is good for you, in a day and age when a lot of us play games independently, online, or we don't have a lot of interaction with each other directly.
Yeah,
you are solving a problem together as a group. So you have to negotiate amongst yourselves. You work cooperatively. You're not trying to kill each other. You as a team are trying to solve the
Accomplish that
problem
goal together.
And then I might say, okay, as you're in this room about ready to free the prince, suddenly the door bursts open and a giant troll comes in.
Oh no!
And what do you do?
And then what? I feel like if you're a wizard, you can get out of stuff easy.
Fairly, but not always.
But you have to roll.
Sometimes you have to roll, or this troll might dodge your spell or whatever. So you sort of get the idea. And the story is sort of improvisational. And the person who's sort of the referee of the game, that's called the Dungeon Master, which is kind of a goofy title for the person who, the Game Master, we'll call him or her.
Okay.
They sort of are the ones who sort of making sure that the story stays on track and that everything you do everything that you want to do doesn't immediately kill you, but at the same time it isn't super easy that you're just not challenged, right? And so you go forward and different things happen, and the adventures can happen, outdoors or underground in the dungeons or, in towns or whatever world that the Dungeon Master creates. So that's sort of the basic idea. And as a result, you have a lot of fun, but you learn some other skills. I believe, anyway.
I just think this is such a great opportunity, especially now. And this game became popular a long, long time ago and kind of has had a resurgence.
Definitely.
And I think it's such a great opportunity for kids to, step away from their screens. And it's so valuable because you can use your imagination. So you are teaching 3-session courses at the Rochambeau Library over spring vacation.
That's
so
right.
We'll put a link online. But the dates are Monday, April 16th, Wednesday, April 18th, and Saturday, April 21st. So you can sign up, and again, we'll put the link up online. So what will you be teaching? Are you teaching basically what we just went through now, kind of how to work through it, how to problem solve?
Yeah, and it's meant to be, a lot of people hear about this game and they think it's either really hard to learn or they think, I'm not nearly nerdy enough to do this. So it's meant to be low entry, anyone who wants to come, it is for kids. But, if it's successful, I might teach a version for adults as well. It's a free class. And the idea is just anyone who wants to come and play can. And we teach you how to play. And, if you've never played a game like that before, you're not really sure. So we'll ease each other into it. Everyone will learn together. And as I notice the group sort of progressing and getting better at it, I kind of make things more difficult and we kind of go along. But it's like any game, there's a certain amount of, there's a learning curve, but it's not a huge one. And, my experience has always been like once people begin to start to play, they don't really worry so much about like, am I doing it right? It doesn't matter. You're having fun.
I think that's so important too. Am I doing this right?
Yeah.
Is this going to work?
Yeah.
And I think especially today when there's so much pressure for grades, activities, functions, like that kind of thing, that goes away with this because it's really just where your mind takes you, where your creative thoughts take you. I think it's so cool too. What I was just thinking about, whenever we go out to dinner or go out to lunch or whatever, you always see kids on their phones or on their tablets or whatever. I think once you learn this game, what a great opportunity if you're going out to dinner or a restaurant, whatever, you can like play with your kids, play a game, or like if you have a couple kids that you're taking out to dinner or something, like get it off the tablet and have them play this game. Yeah,
it's something I feel really passionate about, and I don't want to be sort of grumpy old man, shouting at the clouds or, technology, the future. But I do feel really strongly, and I think a lot of parents out there who have kids are concerned about the amount of time that their kids are spending in front of screens. And that it's not to say that activities on screen can't be useful and can't be valuable and learn and be educational, but we need to balance it and we need to find things that kids can do not in front of screens where they really have to use their problem-solving skills and their imaginations. While the world that you play in Dungeons and Dragons reminds you very much of some really sort of elaborate video games that kids are used to hanging out in.
Yeah.
All that world building, all the cool environments, that's all up here, right? All the kids around the table have to kind of conjure that as a group. And that's what's cool about it. Everyone, of course, has their own idea of what it looks like in their own mind's eye. But as a group, we're kind of telling the story. And you'd be surprised at how easy it is to get immersed into the story and become kind of part of it feels real.
I love being able to build your own world. Okay, so let's talk about, and you originally wrote an article, actually just recently, for ideas.ted.com on how playing Dungeons and Dragons has helped me be more connected, creative, and compassionate. So we'll put a link to this article that you actually just wrote this year. And like I said, you feel very strongly about this, that it has helped make you really who you are, including a better person. So let's talk about 5 reasons. So if we haven't convinced you enough and you're not eager to play now enough, or at least Google what Dungeons and Dragons is and how to play, or if we haven't convinced you to sign your kids up for this class, we're gonna do it right now. Okay, so 5 reasons Dungeons and Dragons will make you a better person. Number 1, you'll get to be part of a team.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we all need to do anyway in life, whether it's at the workplace or working on a project at school or the kind of activity that a kid might have if they're on a sports team. They get that communal group experience where everybody contributes a little bit. Some kids don't have that experience because they're not jocks or that's not how they're inclined. So The game is structured around this notion that everybody, there's dwarves and elves and wizards, and there's a kind of equal distribution of talents and abilities and skills. And so everyone contributes and everybody has a special thing that they can do, but you can't do it alone. And that's a really important skill and I think lesson to teach kids that you can't always do this by yourself. You need to negotiate, and you need to come up with communal solutions to problems that are affecting the fate of everyone.
Gotcha.
So that's number one.
So true. You've hooked me into believing this as well. Okay, number 2. You'll learn how to solve your way out of anything.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. What's great about this game is there's no one way to solve any problem. So the problem we just proposed earlier, where you're trying to figure out a way to get into this castle where you have to rescue someone who's been
and I
captive.
lucked out because I rolled a 20.
And you rolled a 20, which is amazing. So you have beginner's luck, which is great. The kind of, and this is not a way to die, by the way. This is that I might, in my own mind, preparing that adventure for you and your team, I might imagine there's 3 or 4 ways, but the team itself will come up with a way that I didn't even think of. So your job is to kind of think out of the box and come up with a solution. It could be a solution that's like brute force solution, like we're just going to kill everything we see and like destroy stuff. Or maybe there's a guard in the tower and you can go talk to the guard and you can bribe him or her.
Yeah,
you
give
can,
him that wild boar pizza.
Flirt with them or, come up with some kind of way to, I don't know what, charm them or something. So there's many, many ways. Yeah, maybe it's really hungry. And so you give him the pizza and that he's like, okay, he's bored. He just works for the company guarding this tower. He doesn't care. So he lets you in or something like that. So there's more than one. There's always one more more additional ways to solve problems than I think immediately meet the eye. And the group experience of sitting around the table, people throw out ideas, and then as a group you decide, all right, we'll try this. Sometimes you fail.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't, and then you learn and you get better.
It's so great. This is so great. Okay, number 3, you'll grow in character.
You'll grow in character. So I think this is more of a kind of a human development idea. Your character itself grows in the sense that you usually start out at first level. Like when you start out to play a video game, you're kind of like, you just fell off the turnip truck, you've got like a pitchfork and whatever, but you go through these adventures and you pick up stuff, right? You're always equipping your character with cool stuff that you stumble across. And the sort of that trope that you see in a video game is very similar to D&D. So you start out, you're like the farmer's daughter or the stable boy or something, or just a first level wizard. But you gradually get better. And what I like to think about the game, for me as someone who was quite introverted and shy as a kid, is that I didn't feel super comfortable doing adventuresome things in real life because I was just terrified of getting beat up in the locker room, honestly. So the idea that I could go on these imaginary adventures and learn how to be a bit more brave and a bit more self-confident in these game worlds kind of gave me the notion that I could test out some of this brave behavior in the real world. So I kind of had like in front of me this imaginary version of myself that was doing stuff that I couldn't do in real life. And that's cool and powerful, and kids love to be able to do things that they can't do in real life, right? But then I think subtly there's a kind of human, psychological secret sauce here where you begin to actually feel a little bit like, all right, you're coming out of my shell. And that was part of my development. As I played this game more and more, kind of came out of my own shell.
If you see it, you believe it.
Yeah.
And then you practice it.
Exactly.
So, however, if you can imagine something, you can really create it. So, I love this. Okay. Number 4, you'll gain empathy for others.
Yeah. So this is another idea where, part of what it is to role play, and in this game, typically what you do is you not only choose a character like a wizard as you've done, but you will say, I'm going to be an elvish wizard or a dwarf wizard or something. And you might have a particular personality. You might be sort of snarky, or you might be sort of grumpy, or you might be sort of foolhardy, or you come up with some personality traits, right? But in the course of the game, you are going to be encountering all kinds of other people, both people in your group who all have different personalities, right? As well as just the people behind those characters who are maybe strangers to you if you've never played in this group before. And the notion of having to role play someone else means, all right, I'm going to imagine what it might be like to be that other person. And so when I talk to them in the game, or I try to negotiate with somebody in the game, I'm thinking to myself, well, if I were to try to persuade this person, what kind of person would I need to be? Or what would it be like to hear this or understand this problem from that person's or that character's perspective, or that monster's perspective for that matter? So the idea that you're constantly imagining what it's like to be someone else other than yourself is a really important lesson about, again, related kind of before to the other topic we were discussing, but that you're not doing this alone, and you also have to imagine what it's like to be someone who's not yourself.
Really a great building block for kids too, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, whether it's a character or not.
Yeah.
Just being able to relate. Okay, number 5, why Dungeons and Dragons will make you a better person. You'll tap into one of the greatest talents of all, your imagination.
Your imagination, and that's definitely something that gets thrown around a lot. Like, this is a portal to the imagination, and I think lots of activities I think stimulate the imagination. But I think this game, like a lot of activities, but in a special way, Dungeons and Dragons has a way of requiring that you have to really picture this world. You don't get pictures and you don't get a video screen to sort of where you play, and it all happens in your head. And the person who's the sort of referee, he or herself has to prior to the game beginning, do a lot of writing, story building, maybe making maps, designing what the world looks like, what happens in this world, what is the history like, all these sorts of things, right? And then you yourself as a character, you want to come up with a sort of plausible backstory for who you are and how you got here and what drives you. So you're already sort of thinking about character and plot and motivation, that kind of creative stuff. For me, I feel like the game was a very important way to kickstart my own interest in storytelling and being a writer. Like, I don't think I would have been a writer if I hadn't learned how to play this game way back, in the Reagan administration a long time ago. So that part of it is a real, so many people I know who used to play D&D as kids. Not all of them still play like me as an adult. Most of them left it behind, which is fine. But they've gone on to become screenwriters and filmmakers and musicians and creatives. And a lot of famous people, like everything from Stephen Colbert to Vin Diesel to lots of people now are thinking about this idea that maybe it's okay to play these games. They kind of are training grounds for some really important creative and career building and personality building pursuits.
If you take a look at, and again, we'll post the article that you wrote about the 5 reasons why Dungeons and Dragons essentially makes you a better person. You designed this map because it really is a world building game. You designed this map of, and I'm assuming this is just one of your many creations. Yeah. It's so intricate and so detailed. Like you said, back in the Reagan administrations, it really is. You tap into your imagination. You tap into this world that you created. And I just think what a valuable tool. Here it is, this game that someone created. And how it really affected your life so deeply. And we don't even know how many people this has affected so well, right? And the stories that you've written, your book that you've written, so many things. And hopefully this interview and the classes that you're teaching, who knows who else we can inspire, right?
Yeah, I hope so. That's the goal.
It's very exciting. So thank you so much for sharing with it today.
My pleasure.
I'm excited that I got my first taste of Dungeons and Dragons today. I feel like I did really well. But what else is cool is we did like 2, 3, 5 minutes, and these games can go on forever, right? There's really no end. Yeah,
a game session is usually at least a couple hours, sometimes longer, and then the story also continues. That's the other thing to think about, is it's not just a quick one-off 3-hour thing, but you'd get something happens, but we always leave it on a cliffhanger so that we want to play again a week later or a month later or whatever it is. So yeah, these stories can last for weeks, for months, for years, and that's what's kind of cool about it. Is there's always this notion that the story could go on. It's like this sort of epic story that you're part of.
If you're like, I just don't like the story anymore, like, we don't need a sequel, we don't need episode 6.
Right,
Can you just like put the kibosh on it and start
absolutely.
bring another different one about?
Yeah, and the other thing is the flavor that I mentioned earlier of D&D kind of being set in a fantasy world. That may not be appealing to a lot of people. So
can you do like space or westerns?
There's two popular genres. So there's role-playing games that take place in like a post-apocalyptic America, and then there's pirate steampunk ones, and there's ones that are set in the 1920s, and some that have sort of a James Bond espionage. So they don't have to be set in a kind of magical, swords and sorcery, Lord of the Rings world if that doesn't float your boat. They are role-playing games, Star Wars, all these different superheroes. I mean, all the different brands now that all this pop culture nerd stuff has become so popular now, all these different sort of flavors of I guess adventure story. Those are all now available as role-playing games. So whatever tickles your fancy in terms of like, this is the world that kind of gets me excited, there's definitely a game out there for you.
So jump in. Ethan will help you and your kids learn how to play. He's obviously a pro. So we'll have a link on our website to, of course, all the classes. They're available at Rochambeau Library coming up here in about 10 days or so. So thank you so much for joining us today. That was super fun.
Thank you.
And thanks for helping people get excited and stimulate their creative mind. We're wrapping up here on Go Local Live in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. We'll see you once again.